337. My girlfriend recorded 337 podcasts, Sejan.
Oh, shit.
Well, you're supposed to go in a row.
Oh, I didn't know we were continuing the bit. I thought you were just making a
Hi,
reference.
ladies and gentlemen.
You already made the joke. Why would I repeat the joke you just made?
Because the joke that I made was off mic. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 337th episode of The Say Report. I'm your host, Devin.
Say something when you've started recording that because we've talked about this before.
We have talked
Devin
about
never
this.
tells us when he starts recording, so.
I mean, I switch into a different voice, right? You said
No, you don't.
I don't? Oh, God. That's good to know. I always. Anywho, before we go further, I'm Devin Decker. He's my host companion, Poobah Frazier, the guy with the fly tie, Sejan Saroway.
Do you think you turned into like Mr. Movie Phone? Like, hello.
Hello, and welcome to the Say Report. No, I don't know. I guess it's good. That's actually very... going back, right? The 337 was just for the joke. This is no landmark. I mean, it's the most episodes of a single podcast I've ever recorded. I believe the same is for you. But, that's just the territory that we've been in for a while.
Yeah, there's my Simpsons podcast that is just after every episode, I just give a breakdown of why these characters matter. And, basically, those books you used to be able to buy, those bathroom readers for Simpsons?
Yeah.
Yeah. I basically record audiobook versions of those, but I don't let anybody else hear them. They're just for me. I put them on while I'm in the bath.
Those are for me. That's so I can understand my
really
time and experience.
If you publish it, but then make it private so that only I can access it, is it still a podcast?
Wow, that is an existential question that I was not prepared for 2 minutes into the episode. Existential stuff we usually save for after the 10-minute mark, right? I don't even know. That's bravo, Sejan. And yeah, we're here. We're doing the Say Report. I'm excited to be here. I don't know.
He said, try to convince himself.
Try to get it is. I don't even. Here's the thing. Here's what it all comes down to. Right now, there are two things that I want to do. I want to sing like Melissa Etheridge. So badly do I want to sing like Melissa Etheridge, and I kind of want to explore my feelings, but at the same time, my feelings weighed against literally every other thing going on in the world right now.
The level at which neither of those two things really need to be recorded is pretty phenomenal.
I know, right? But it's time to record the Say Report. What, you don't know. Just to meet you. Oh, that wasn't even good. I don't come to my window. I can do it. I'm not in the... I want to sing talk Melissa Etheridge.
Oh, man.
I guess I can only bring up the Melissa Etheridge stuff because, it might pepper into the episode. I recently set up a new... I'm an audio guy, right? I have a bunch of audio training, and I wanted to be able to listen to stuff on my computer while playing Super Mario Brothers 2, The Lost Levels, the Japanese version, because I made it my goal to complete it 8 times before the end of June, so that and then I can take a break from it. So the big thing I've done this week is play that, but then I also finally got a small mixing board and set it up to have all of my video games running through that and the computer, so that I can just wear one pair of headphones and get to be Mixmaster Devin putting together the sounds. And yeah. So one of the things I did was just throw on music on YouTube on the Say Report YouTube channel, because on the laptop that I have set up, it was signed into our YouTube account. We're on YouTube, by the way. That's not a huge deal. I prefer if you go listen to us on the podcast things, the podcast aggregates like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or really Stitcher, any of those things that are out there. But we're also on YouTube because, you'd be a fool. We've said this before. You'd be a fool not to have a YouTube presence. Yeah. Especially now as we're on the verge of a potential new adpocalypse in YouTube, with them lowering the bar to entry to be able to monetize your YouTube channel. And then in addition, the fact that they may have broken a bunch of their own terms and conditions about advertising.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with YouTube is it's always been one hand not knowing what the other hand's doing.
Yeah.
That's how that entire operation has always operated, and then it's always it always shakes out when somebody calls them out on it, right? Like bullshit will happen for a while until one of the big wigs, like one of their big stars, gets hit in some way, gets affected in some way, and they, and it blows up, and really like YouTube more than more than any other company, I think really suffers from like I don't know the right way to put this. They won't do fucking anything until Twitter blows up on them, right? And I say Twitter, but I mean social media in general, right? Like because Twitter is not necessarily going to be an entity much longer after all the shit going on there this week too. But yeah, the ways in which YouTube doesn't move until there's a just 300,000 YouTube watchers behind it, like pushing them, right? Then they'll do something, and then it's never a guarantee what they'll do, whether or not it's going to be the right move or not. But anyway, yeah. So they found out that
I think what you're looking for is that they're reactive. They're not proactive.
Yeah, and reactive implies that the second somebody says something, they start doing something is the real problem, right? They're not even reactive. They're
like
lazy.
procreactive.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and they found out this week, or again, I keep saying they found out like they didn't really think about this, so it's not really like a found out thing, but it turns out that a bunch of their own like practices kind of go against their own TOS.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing to find out. And then I really do enjoy that the arguments that have come out are how, no, they've actually inoculated themselves against the exact thing that you're discussing. And it's like, but that doesn't matter because they didn't come out and say anything about it until the court of public opinion had already decided that they're guilty of this crime. Like, it doesn't change the way that people are reacting to hearing about this. Mm-hmm. To be told after the fact, no. Like, there are definitely people who mentioned these things that are being cited, but because of the way that they've handled it so far, it's sort of like the terms and conditions. We all agree to the terms and conditions, but then if Apple were ever try to make good on the whole "you owe us your firstborn child" thing, like people would be like, no, we don't.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, it's a pretty, like it's armchair like lawyering at this point, right? Like, but this is something that the entire internet is guilty of doing is this exact thing, right? Is like we kind of lost track of what the idea of what TOS is, like that terms of service contract that you agree to when you sign up for a thing, and people seem to think one of two things: either that shit is law, and they're just like, I don't know, there are terms of service that you agree to said A, B, and C, but as you just pointed out, that's not always the case because a contract is only as good as it holds up in court. And if a court decides, like, wait a minute, this contract is kind of bullshit, like, that can happen. It does happen frequently. But it's the other way around, too. Is, like, very frequently people seem to just do what they want because they think nobody reads the TOS. And it's like, well, no, that also doesn't work. Like, we really muddied the waters in that particular conversation. We've done a very good job of making an extremely gray, murky area for people to operate on the internet.
Yeah. I mean, that's the internet. The internet is our gray, murky area, and it's like 2023 is when we decided that we're going to shine a light on it.
Yeah, I would say that people have been making an effort for years. I think we're finally hitting a point where people all kind of agree we have to get this shit sorted out, but by this point, it's such a fucking mess, right? It's going to take a real deft hand to come in and fix this shit. And I don't know who that is. Like, I'm not going to sit here and point, like, it's definitely not going to be a guy like Elon Musk, right? It's not even, I mean, even like, like a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates, who are not two guys that I think have made any large efforts to outwardly shape the internet at large. They're corners of it for sure. Whereas like a guy like Musk is definitely out there claiming that he's going to save us all, right? But that's not going to happen, buddy. I'm sorry.
No, probably not. In fact, the biggest issue with that deft hand to control and corral the internet is we already have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly.
There's
we have
not
too many people that think that they have a right to that hand, and they don't necessarily.
And it's not necessarily those big four guys that we just mentioned on the show. Kind of everybody has this weird claim to the internet.
I mean, the real answer is it's Al Gore, right? We all know that. I mean, he created the damn thing. He's got to put the fucker down. Like it's my dog, Dad. I'll do it. That's
Jeez.
my Al Gore impression.
It's pretty good Al Gore. And was that an Old Yeller? Is that Al Gore
Yeah,
and Old
yeah,
Yeller?
yeah, yep, exactly.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I just don't know. Like that whole thing with YouTube and everything there is kind of crazy. But like that's the thing is that like I have some feelings that I kind of want to explore, but then I think about it and it's like, bro, in terms of everything in the world, like you got nothing. You got nothing to complain about. Like and I don't know if that's men will do anything to avoid seeking therapy or seeking help, or if it's like kind of a healthy thing to be like compared against the other problems in the world. It's nice that you can identify that like something is off, but the fact that you can be like it could be a lot worse. That feels at least like a healthy step.
Well, I mean, acknowledging the good in the world is like a great healthy thing to do, but like also admitting that that's not enough is completely fair as well. Like
Yeah.
this is like if you're worried that because like things are going so well for you, you don't have a dog in this fight. Like my friend, I have news
Oh
for
yeah,
you.
that's
Like,
not
exactly,
what that's
yeah,
that's not
because
what it is.
that's how you get that. You're right. That's how the sneak attack happens.
Yeah.
That's when the world comes up from behind and just clocks you on the back of the head one day.
No, that's not what it is. It's just one of those situations where, like, we kind of have wars going on. We had a coup last weekend that, like, was still too fresh for us to even begin to look at, and still, I don't even, like, it began and ended within 12 hours.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said there about what were people thinking like when they started that madness, and then like why aren't more people involved, right? Like it's the same conversation that we have about shit over here. It's just that instead of guns, we're just talking about people's personal rights. But it's
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Let's recenter. Let's recenter the Say Report and try to move on from there. This has been a very interesting intro. How do you feel about Titanic going up on Netflix yesterday?
I feel like it's in response to a lot of shit in the world right now.
I feel like that is the bit. The funny bit is to be like, they totally
Obviously,
sought out the licensing to Titanic
Well,
because of Ocean Gate. But we talk all the time on this show that, like, that's just not how it works.
Right, right. And like this is kind of it's the same thing like we talked about last week with Disney Marvel and the use of AI art in their show from Secret War, right?
Secret
Like this
Invasion.
idea being that this was probably a decision made a long time ago. This was probably something that somebody did honestly probably put some effort into and like work and stuff like this, blah blah blah. But the optics of the timing, like as a company, how do you not say, it might cost us a little bit more or to do this, but we probably shouldn't do this right now, right? Like, and that idea that Netflix right now has Titanic that just pops up this week is funny, is a meme, blah blah blah. But like you said, they definitely made this decision earlier. But come on, how hard would it have been to be like, maybe we don't push it, right? Or maybe we don't put it up yet. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe once they're in a contract, they're in a contract, right? Like, I mean, that's the bitch of it, really. In both counts, right? In the
Yeah.
Disney stuff, like they paid for that shit to be out there. If they don't put it out there, who knows what kind of like legal trouble and that they find themselves in. Also, I will say, for all of that shit that we not that we gave, that the world gave Disney last week about all their AI stuff. A second episode of that show went up this week and I didn't hear fuck all from anybody. So like clearly that has seemed to have fizzled out. Like I'm sure there are a couple of people still out there that are taking issue with what Disney's doing because like they have legitimate like understanding of the issue and want to draw attention to it. But the reactive nature of the internet, as we were talking about earlier, seems to have dissipated on that one, right? And so like kind of in the same vein here, like it's funny that Titanic got put up, but I haven't heard anybody like call out Netflix on it, more that it's just like, ooh, bad. That was a bad move, and then they watched it and they moved on.
Yeah, I mean, it was like morning radio shows and those sorts of things where they're like, I can't believe they're doing this. And I'm like, now I get it. You're basically Wally and the Coos on 92.8 FM trying to like get a laugh in the morning before you tell people the traffic. But like,
You trying to avoid insulting a particular person was really fun to watch there for a second.
I was trying to think of the name of the one from Family Guy.
Yeah.
The name of those. I couldn't think of that. I couldn't think of any actual fictional DJs, so I made up Wally on the Coos on 98.
Doesn't Stewie just go by the baby on that in that episode?
But I don't want to do that. I don't want to insult Brian Griffin and Stewie Griffin. That's like a death sentence. I'm still in Rhode Island, Sajin. They'll find me. They already know where I am.
People everywhere.
They'll just march on Decker. No, it's I couldn't remember the one before they become the dog and the baby, which I think it is. But like, so them doing that as like a way to fill their 5 minutes of airtime before traffic, I get that. But then in the back of my head, it's like I'm kind of happy that on our show we do so many things about, but like licensing is already set. Like, it was not an idea of, like, Netflix the guy, right? We've never created a personification of Netflix, so let's just make Netflix the guy in the Say Report universe. He's not like, oh, Titanic is trending. We need to get the movie right now.
I think if Netflix was a guy, he probably looks like Hunter Biden, right? Like a little older, a little ragged, but like still pretty clean cut and taking, like recovering from an addiction, right? Like Netflix is the guy that partied a lot in college, but has gotten his shit together. But all anybody ever seems to want to talk about is his party days in college. And he walks in the room and he's just like, he's clean cut, ready to go, and everybody's just like, there he is, there's the butt chugger, and he's just like, oh god, guys, come on.
Guys, I did it 18 times. Please remember other things about the party.
That was 30 years ago. Why am I still the butt chugger? Well, Netflix.
For me, it was Dr. Marvin Monroe. Basically for the same exact thing, just further along in life than Hunter Biden currently is. Oh, Netflix the guy. But yeah, it's like, that would be insane, right? Oh man, everybody's talking about the Titanic. Let's get the movie Titanic. It's just one of those situations where they're like, oh man, we'll get Titanic. It'll be great for July. Why? It will be great for July.
It's a big epic film. It's a good summer blockbuster. It's the James Cameron movie that is not Avatar. We don't have access to that, but we do have access to this, right? Like, it totally, like, I understand why you go for Titanic this year, right? Like, as a film to get for your streaming service. Just, then the last month happened, and it's just like, somebody had to be sitting there just kind of like, do we do this? We got to do this, right? It's not really about the Titanic. It's just around the Titanic. It's not really about the Titanic, right? But I mean, it is the Titanic. Oh shit.
Yeah. I mean, and the same thing happens. We all know that Jeopardy is recorded earlier. Titanic was the final Jeopardy on Thursday.
Oh man.
About the book that inspired the character of Rose as the narrator. Like, it's just like, wow. And what it really feels like is Bader Meinhof, right? And that is the truest thing about it. We, as a nation, at least in our lifetimes, have always been obsessed with the Titanic. Like, it feels like this evergreen topic in our lives. Did you go to the Titanic exhibit when it was in Boston?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
like we did like a school trip to
exactly.
it. Exactly.
We probably met there. If this were a TV show, we'd now show the episode where we were both there and like were adversarial towards one another, not knowing that one day we'd be recording a podcast.
Or like in like a Richard Linklater-esque, like we just kind of kept affecting each other's past, but not quite meeting each other, so we never,
Yeah, exactly. Like, it just seems like one of those situations. Like, we're at the McDonald's that's filled after it with like 8 schools who are on the field trip, and I really want like a McNuggets, and you get the McNuggets right before me.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here's a better reference. Just to throw another one out there. It's Heat, right? We had Michael Mann directing, and we met maybe like twice, and all anybody ever asked was, when are those two going to get back together? And then we finally did this, and everybody's kind of meh on 8 minutes, but it's fine.
Sick Heat reference there. But yeah, like, it's like the Titanic has been this pervasive thing.
No, Wait, it wasn't 88 Minutes was the one where it's a Righteous Kill. Isn't that the one where they finally got back together?
Righteous Kill is
That
the one where they
really,
eventually came
that
back
fucking
together, yeah.
weird one where, I mean, spoiler alert for a really bad cop movie where like Al Pacino turns out to be like the bad guy the whole time. So like you're watching it and you're like, oh, it's like Heat except they're on the same side. And then by the end of the movie you're like, oh no, it's just Heat again.
Yep. Oh, I thought it was going to be different, but it's just Heat 2. But they called it Righteous Kill. I think,
Righteous
jeez.
Kill, man. What a weird middling movie.
But it was everybody we wanted back together. And yet we still never learn. We still want that in all of our movies. I don't know. It's just what Ocean Gate has done, and the tragedy of that whole ship is just remind the world how much the Titanic is a topic in our lives still.
Yeah, man. I mean, but to your point about this idea of it, right? But to your point about how like it's just something we always talk about. So when something comes up related to it, then we start like pointing out all the Titanic references in our lives. Like that's true with everything, right? Like there's all these references. Like the one of the weird ones from me, and this is gonna kind of give away some weird bubbles that I'm in, but like the Mothman shit and West Virginia and the bridge collapse, right? Like, do you know like the whole kind of folklore around that, American folklore legend?
So I know the
around...
legend of the Mothman.
Right.
I don't know about a bridge collapse in West Virginia. I know about the one in Philadelphia.
The legend of the Mothman is that the Mothman appears just before disaster happens.
Okay.
Like that's like the hook of the Mothman. And the biggest example of that is the original sightings of the Mothman in West Virginia in like the 1970s, I want to say, maybe 1980s. Like that was when the Mothman legend kind of really took off. You could argue that there's some like weird stuff before that, but that's where like there's like a town in West Virginia where like the Mothman is now like the like mascot of the town because of all of this stuff that happened in the 70s. All these people kept citing him, seeing him, blah blah blah. And one of the last times he was supposedly sighted was before a giant bridge collapse in West Virginia and a bunch of people died. And that is straight up the reference of the Kevin Costner movie, right? It's Kevin Costner or is it Richard Gere? I forget which one of those.
I don't know. The Mothman Prophecies, though.
The Mothman Prophecies
about, right?
is like, but that is the story that it retells and all that shit. Like that is the folklore, is that the Mothman shows up, and if you see the Mothman, that means disaster is going to strike. So try and get someplace safe. And one of the last times he was seen was that, right? And then like, you know, I heard that story when I was a kid, and then suddenly there was a movie about it, and then suddenly there was like books about it, and then suddenly there was like weird TV specials about going to West Virginia because people pick up on the zeitgeist, right? And then since then, that's just kind of always been a thing in the back of my head, and I can't tell you how often I see cool like Mothman jokes and references. But a couple of years ago, during I think mid-COVID, when people were really losing their minds, people started claiming that they were seeing the Mothman again, and it kind of became a big thing where everybody was just like, oh shit, we got to talk about the Mothman because disaster is going to strike. What disaster is it going to be this time? And then every disaster that happened over 4 years, everybody was like, it's the Mothman. And it's just like, no guys, like you found this thing that you could attribute, right? Like you connected this thing to this, and now it's all you're going to connect it to for the next like 5 years, and then we're going to move on from it, right? And it's the same thing here with the Titanic stuff, is anytime anybody talks about the Titanic, people are going to offhandedly mention Ocean Gate for a while, but at some point we will move on from that, but we'll still keep talking about Titanic, right?
Oh yeah, we've been talking about Titanic literally forever. I don't know. It's Richard Gere in the Mothman Prophecies. Also,
thank you. I couldn't remember which.
That's fine. The Mothman for me was. The Mothman for me is the bestiary entry that I always miss in Castlevania.
Nice.
Is the Mothman, because he's not like just there. You have to usually make things happen. Like there's a certain set of small objectives you need to complete in order for him to show up. And I'm just like, I don't care. I don't
The weirdest
care
one for me
about
was
the
Fallout.
Mothman.
Fallout 76, I believe, which is I think makes sense because it's the one that takes place
West
in
Virginia.
Appalachia. Yeah. So, but there's like a Fallout 76 quest that I like ran into one day, and I was like, no shit. It's like. Considering the disaster this game is, maybe this was a prophecy. No, I didn't think that's not fair.
Ooh. I do like the thought in my head. It warms my mind and my heart to think that there's some high school in West Virginia that is the Fighting Mothmen.
Yeah.
And is it the lady Mothmen or is it the Moth women for
Well,
their
it's like a
female
huge point of
teams?
contention for people because some people take it really seriously and they kind of hate that the Mothman has become this kind of like, for all intents and purposes, like beloved, like mythical character. And like I said, there's some towns where they just turned it into straight up just their tourist industry is like Mothman shit, and people are just like, people are dying. Like, we shouldn't be celebrating this. Like, this is all about celebrating like these huge disasters where tens of hundreds of people have died. Like, what are we doing?
I mean, I understand that bit of the argument, but the Mothman tried to warn you. But he's also a moth. So he tries to avert the disaster, but he sees a bright light and then, sorry, Mothman distracted.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's like I said, there's stuff out there in all of our lives that bubbles up all the time, and we connect it to shit. And like at some point, we have to acknowledge that like sometimes life is just happening. So like with this Titanic shit with Netflix, like it's a great joke, but at the end of the day, there's no way that Netflix. Man, if we ever found out that's the way that they operated, they were just looking around at like, what's everybody talking about? I don't know. People are happy about this. It doesn't matter. Like,
no, I mean, I'm sure that like one of the film sites announced that they were getting it in July before all of the tragedy happened.
mm-hmm.
So, like, we could find that proof that they were already going to get it. It just then becomes, I mean, the real cynical part of it is that it becomes this really weird marketing push to watch Titanic on Netflix.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh man, you know what, a movie I haven't watched in a minute? Titanic. And then you watch Titanic again and you see that scene where Billy Zane literally loses his fucking mind. And you're just like, wow, this guy, he was not a good guy. And then I get sad because if that had never happened, maybe the Phantom would be more beloved. I blame the Titanic for sinking the Phantom as a franchise.
Nah, the Phantom did pretty well on its own, singing itself.
Yeah, no, Treat Williams having a ball, but still, yeah. I don't know. I like that movie still. I'm excited to watch it for the show one day.
Have we talked about the fact that like I have a real hard time always separating the Phantom from the Shadow, like the movie versions, like in my head, like because which one is the one with the the microscope that has the knife in it? Is that the Shadow or is that the Phantom? That is the Phantom. Okay, yeah. Treat Williams has that thing where he's like, I want to show you something. Like, it's like, oh gosh, which is also, I'm pretty sure, a stolen bit from Oklahoma, isn't it?
I have blanked all memories of Oklahoma from my mind.
So when What's His Nuts comes back from Kansas City, he shows everybody this cool thing that he has, and if I'm remembering correctly, the cool thing he has is that device.
Is that a style device like that?
Yeah, where he's like, it's like a telescope, but it's a knife because things are dangerous in Kansas City. But then they're like, no, everything's up to date in Kansas City. We're not doing Oklahoma.
We're not doing Oklahoma.
But I'm pretty sure that the Phantom stole a bit from Oklahoma and turned it into one of the creepiest fucking villain moves in like.
It is the moment where I'm like, well, the Phantom is not fucking around.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of, and crazy, like, we've covered a bunch of movies that, like, eventually lead to the Phantom happening. Like, we've done Batman 89, it's not available yet, but then Darkman and Dick Tracy.
The Shadow. I mean, the Shadow is definitely in that line, yeah.
Yeah, 95. And then the next one is the Phantom. Because it's old pulp heroes getting, like, modernized in a weird way. Though the Phantom is still set in the past, but it has weird sensibilities of the present in that movie. Yeah, I love that movie. I freaking love Catherine Zeta-Jones.
And all of it was leading to Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Arguably, all of it was leading to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. But you haven't seen that movie yet. But
well, yeah, no, I mean, like, let's. You brought it up. Let's talk about this a little bit. Like, I am excited about a new Indiana Jones. Like, I want to make that very clear before we talk about all the reasons I'm probably not going to see it for a while, right? But like, I'm all on board for a new Indiana Jones. From everything that I understand about like this being a quote unquote send off and stuff, it's beautifully done. You know, I love Mangold, right? Like the guy that picked up the mantle on this one, like, is one of our favorite directors. We've gushed about him recently, right?
Yeah.
So like super on board for this movie, but like could not be at a worse time in like my life, the world, like for this movie to be coming out, right? And I understand why it's coming out this week. They're trying to hit 4th of July. They want this to be the big holiday movie this year. Like I get that, but everybody is talking about this movie. This is kind of like Top Gun Maverick all over again for me. I'm not against this movie in any way. I just don't have the drive to go and see it because the rest of the world is piling on this movie, and all I can think is walking into a movie theater just full of just like 200 people to see a movie that I'm moderately excited about. It just doesn't, like, the math doesn't work for me, right? And like it'd be one thing if it was like I need to see this movie on the big screen, right? Like I'm having kind of the other side of this conversation for me is Oppenheimer. Like I'm kind of really excited to go see that movie in a theater because I really do feel like it's gonna be like a specific way to see that movie. Not the only way to see that movie. But I do think that getting to see it on an IMAX screen, which out here is super accessible for us, and like I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that for Indiana Jones. There's just not it's just not worth it for me. And I don't know where the line is. Like, I don't know what it is specifically about my feelings with Indy. Maybe it is kind of Crystal Skull, like leaking over, even though I'm one of the few people that actually like still enjoy that movie, even though I know it's the worst Indiana Jones. Like, I'm not going to fight anybody on that, but like, I don't think it's nearly the trash heap that everybody seems to claim it is. But like, maybe it is just kind of that like middling feeling about that movie, being like, I don't need to push my luck for this one, right?
Yeah. So first off, the other reason is when you invent the summer blockbuster, I feel like they always sort of reserve this moment right now for Steven Spielberg. Even if it's a property that like he kind of had his fingers in and he's not involved other than as a producer, they're going to try to give him the July 4th weekend. I mean, look at Transformers. Look at Transformers and Michael Bay, and the fact that those films still were July 4th releases.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big deal that Rise of the Beast came out 2 weeks beforehand because something else took precedent.
Yeah.
It's, sorry, just bringing it all together with that. For me, and Indiana Jones is not something that I grew up with. Indiana Jones is a movie that I watched in my senior year of high school. And I say Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Which also, here's a little thing from me. I'd like your opinion on it. Everybody has been shortening the titles of the Indiana Jones films, like Indiana Jones LC for Last Crusade, or, I mean, Temple of Doom has always been like TOD, Indy TOD, and then, Skull. Somebody shortened Raiders of the Lost Ark to ROTLA. I mean, we just call it Raiders, right?
I was going to say Raiders is the way that I've always heard it referred to.
It was like, someone's like, Indiana Jones, ROTLA, and I'm like, what is that? What are you talking about?
I've heard it called Raiders so much. I was actually going to say this, but you were making a good valid point, so I didn't want to interrupt. But like, people call it Raiders so much that if somebody just says Raiders, they don't need to say Indiana Jones to me. Like, I know what movie they're talking about. If they're like, we were watching Star Wars and we were just really missing this, and we put Willow on and we thought, what the fuck, we'll watch Raiders too. It's like, yeah, hell yeah. Like you're in on that conversation already, right? Like, the shorthand for that movie is definitely just Raiders.
I mean, down to the fact that one isn't even Indiana Jones. It's just Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
They added the Indiana Jones later.
Well, I mean, like, that's like the stories that you hear about Star Wars being retroactively labeled Episode 4, right?
Yes.
Because like there was just all of this shit about like what he could do, and he realized. So like people seem to like there seems to be mixed messages out there about what that movie was originally called, because there are definitely people that saw that movie when it was just called Star Wars, right? Or like it didn't even have like a subtitle to it. But the original Indiana Jones was just and this the serialization of the character caused them to put the name on him all, and it works, but like definitely Raiders. I don't know if I'm down on the whole letter shortening of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, neither do I. I think that you get to do
it. Like, a lot of the times people do that to save time, but if you're using just as many syllables to say it, then just say
right. I mean, this was on Twitter, and I'm just like, so it's on Twitter, and it's like, I guess Raiders is technically 2 letters more than writing ROTLA, but just just call it like Raiders makes sense. Or like Ark. I don't even know. Like it's something that stuck with me. So I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark as a senior in high school. I was probably 18 years old. I will be completely honest because I didn't take my film and literature class in high school until the spring semester. So I don't see this movie till I'm 18 years old, and I fall in love with this movie. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe that like I just never saw this film. But then at the same time, I'm like, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because getting to watch it as, for all intents and purposes, as an adult, I think that it got to speak to me on all of the levels that Steven Spielberg was kind of aiming for the audience. Like, he wasn't making it to be some kids movie. I think that he was trying to entertain all audiences, but the way that a Pixar movie has jokes for the kids and the adults, Raiders has that as well. Am I wrong there?
I mean, it's almost like you're just talking about well-constructed film that affects all audiences, which is like Spielberg's kind of forte, right? No, we talk about Pixar magically figuring out the formula as if they were the first ones to ever do it, but we're just talking about good filmmaking, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what people are saying when they say this, is like, you're talking about the fact that Raiders, I mean, I would be hard pressed to not include it in like a top 10 movies of all time for me. Like, it's kind of a perfect movie. Like, the only thing holding it back from like a number one slot is that Indiana Jones is just not my favorite hero character in the world, right? I mean, he's also not my least favorite though, because like, honestly, he really, that movie would be top 10 for me.
Yeah. I mean, Indiana Jones is one of those things that lives rent free in my head, but he's so good at like not ever causing problems. I only ever think about him when someone else brings up the character. Like
Harrison Ford in that regard.
Yeah. It just sort of works that way. But I remember when I took that course and I argued that like Indiana Jones is a superhero because of what he battles against. He might not have powers, but he is able to combat and prove victorious over things that are super powered. So like that's a superhero in my book. So like these are the thoughts that are in my head. I don't see Temple of Doom: Last Crusade until Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is coming out. And I watch Raiders and I'm like, man, this is such a good movie. And then I watch those two movies and I'm like, they're good, but they're not Raiders. So like, I was just weirdly set up for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to be okay, just not Raiders.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. I mean, there are some great moments in it. It's just, if you're somebody who grew up with Indiana Jones literally your entire life, there's some pretty big departure. But arguably, that's the point of that movie, is how the world has changed.
Yeah, I definitely, for sure. I also remember a large part of it not necessarily being even while a lot of people had issues with the content of the story of that movie, that was never like a big thing in my family. Like, I mean, we walked out of that movie and my mom, of all people, like the most religious person in my life, turned to me and was just like, I think it's really cool that they decided to explore aliens as opposed to these like religious stuff, because like it's all on the same level, right? Like, it's all this supernatural stuff, and these like, and I was like, yeah, man, like I'm all for that. So like, the content was never an issue for me. The bigger thing that was always kind of talked about in the circles around me were the ways in which that movie was made, right? Like, that movie is a huge departure from the originals in the amount of, I mean, the biggest thing is the CGI, right? Yeah. Like, there's so much more like CGI, and there's so much going on in terms of like on set. Like, it's not filmed on a backlot, right? Which is one of the big things about Indiana Jones, that like, it's so, the style of the filmmaking in that movie is so beloved that one of the most famous things that came out of it was the behind the scenes like park ride thing you could go on, the studio tour you could go on for Indiana Jones, right? Like, that was such a meme that it shows up in like episodes of sitcoms, and that's like how crazy is that? This movie is so beloved not just because of what's on the screen, but also the ways in which it was made, right? And then Crystal Skull comes along and is made in a very different way. A lot of green screen, that was the word I was searching for earlier. There's a lot of moments in that movie that are very clearly like in front, just Harrison Ford in front of a bunch of just CGI nonsense, for lack of a better word. And people took issue with that, and like I can respect that, but we've talked before about how that has never been a sticking point for me. Like, give me the best computer graphics in the world. Like, I'm all for that. Give me the worst computer graphics in the world. Just like I want the best prosthetics in the world and the worst prosthetics in the world.
Yeah.
I want to see the same technology. I want to see the same with all my tech.
I want there to be an engaging story, and there's some real engaging stuff in Crystal Skull. First of all, this is a movie I've only seen one time. The only Indiana Jones film that I have seen multiple times is Raiders of the Lost Ark. That is just the fact of facts. I have never watched Temple of Doom a second time. I've never watched Last Crusade a second time. I've never watched Crystal Skull a second time. I'll probably watch Dial of Destiny a second time. Which, if there is any sort of endorsement that you need from me, there you go.
Yeah, well, and just to that last bit about the style of filmmaking.
Yeah.
I get the impression that while there is definitely still some CGI going on in this movie, you know, it talks about de-aging and stuff like that. Again, haven't seen it, so I'm not going to call out too much. But, like, I do also get the impression that there's also a lot of practical stuff that happens, right? Like, stunts and stuff like that, which was a big deal for them when making this movie, is that they wanted to try and get back to some of that stuff that they felt that Crystal Skull was called out for lacking.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm excited to see it, but again, there's nothing about Indiana Jones, nothing about this movie that makes me think I need to go out against a 4th of July crowd to go and see this movie in 2023. I will be perfectly happy waiting until it's either up on Disney Plus or if it's still in theaters in 2 months and people are still kind of just like, oh, you should just go see it. Like, you know, if it's at the cheap theater, just go see it. Like, maybe then, but not today, not this weekend for sure.
Yeah, the only reason that I saw it was just a bunch of happy accidents coming together. I had to take my parents to an appointment on the 30th, so I had already taken the day off for that, and then they were going to be there for like multiple hours. And they're like, you know, so if you don't need to sit around because they don't allow more than one person in the place at a time, but they needed someone to drive them. So I'm like, yeah, okay, so I'll just go kill time. I'll find a way to kill time. And then I found out James Mangold was directing it. I'm like, there's the perfect way to kill time. It's 5 minutes from where I'm dropping them off. It's 3 hours on the website. The movie's 2:30 in like actual runtime. 2:34, I think, is the official number. I'm like, that is the perfect way to do it. And then it's like, and I also need to see how sold out it is at this point. So when I looked it up to see it was available, no other tickets had been sold yet, which was crazy to me. Because I sent you that I got my tickets for that a week ago. Like, It was very down to the wire, last minute decision on my part. Because I just found out what I needed to do. And it just, like, this is the best solution for me. And even then, right, you know this. I don't know if I've talked about it on the show yet. That whole going out and braving crowds thing, I'm not 100% with that. And a thing that Dale and I had started doing before the pandemic for things like Star Wars or the Avengers movie, we had the AMC ticket thing, right? So we got our tickets for free. But then, since before we were going to buy tickets anyway, we would buy a seat to our left and a seat to our right so that, like, we wouldn't have humanity right on top of us during the movie. And that, whatever, however you want to feel about that, is the thing that we did for, like, what is the last one? Rise of Skywalker? Is that the last movie in Star Wars?
Rise of the Skywalker, but yeah.
I couldn't think of the name of it. We did it for that one. We did it for Endgame. We did it for Infinity War. Like, these movies that, well, Infinity War just sort of happened to happen that nobody sat next to us, and we enjoyed it so much that we're like, well, this is how we're going to see movies from now on. We're going to figure out a way to do it. And yes, you're paying a premium on it, but you want it to be a good experience, right? You don't want to be fighting for the armrest, right? You don't want someone breathing on you during the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, and even then, even with no tickets were sold when I did it, you see where I buy the tickets because we saw Black Adam together. I like that last row. I try to get 9, 10, and 11 in that last row. And then if there are more people, I spread out so that we still have that buffer and nobody's going to be on top of us. And I now do this for every movie, not just premieres, but like I don't want people sitting next to me when I can say I own this seat and I have a ticket that says I own this seat.
Right.
And then getting there, I ended up getting there just a little bit late, like 5 minutes to the movie thing. And someone was sitting in one of my seats. And it's like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. And I still saw the movie because I was still able to have a buffer to my left and my right. But like, I'm right there with you with the whole I don't want to deal with the crowds.
Yeah, I mean,
Like-
you know, like I said, there's definitely going to be some movies that I'm willing to do that for, and there's some movies that I just it's not, you know,
Yeah.
the whole and you know, dealing with the crowds is one part of it. It's
Yeah.
just it's the whole fucking thing of like having to go find a movie theater because there's like 20 around me, so like figuring out which one is worth going to because maybe this one's starting at 3:30, but this one's starting at like 3:15, and that extra 15 minutes might be just what I need to get back to work or whatever I'm doing that night, right? And then on top of that, like when you get to the movie theater, like there's just a whole lot of stuff now, at least out here, about like every movie theater has like a lounge and like and all that stuff. So you have to go through like it's a maze of rooms to get to the theaters themselves. And in those rooms, you're not just dealing with the people from your movie. You're dealing with everybody from the theater.
At the
So
theater,
that's like
yeah.
if it's a busy night, like you might also be going through like tons of crowds of people that aren't even going to be the crowd you're sitting with like for 3 hours. And then, you know, I don't want to complain too much about the commercials before movies thing because like I understand how movie theaters need to operate nowadays in order to live. Like we've always talked about how there needs to be a real come to Jesus moment on the split that movie theaters themselves actually get from tickets because like holy shit, how does anybody operate a theater? Well, the secret is they put 45 minutes of commercials before every movie. But like the ways that they do it out here now, they don't even they just weave them in with the previews. There's not like a separated amount, so it's not even like, oh, I'll just show up 10 minutes late because the first 10 minutes will be commercials anyway. Like if I want to see any type of preview that I might be excited about, or if I just want to be in that like movie place, like then I'm going to see a Coke commercial, a car commercial, then a preview, then it's going to be an M&M's commercial, and then a preview, and then like like they don't separate them out anymore. So there is also something there that it really gets to me now because like I feel like I'm basically channel surfing for 20 minutes before the movie starts, and like when the movie starts I'm in like a really weird place.
Yeah. I will say they've done a cool thing. The Mutants Mayhem movie, they have a trailer that is essentially the whole, look for the exits to the left and right of the screen. Make sure you shut off your cell phones. It's like they've done that house announcement, but with the turtles.
Nice.
And that is super cool because that's the last thing that plays before the movie now.
Yeah.
And that's at least like the last 4 that I've gone to. And that is cool because it calibrates me the way that the pre-show that they do between the commercials and the previews used to calibrate me, but then I'm watching 12 trailers before the movie. Like, to have that really kind of put me back in the thing, I've enjoyed that. And I wouldn't mind if more films did that for their trailers.
Are you still seeing the thanks for returning to theaters, like you're the real heroes commercials type stuff?
I haven't seen that in any of the films I've seen in June.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's kind of a toss up whether or not we see one of those. Like honestly, it's movie dependent. If it's a movie that like that is related to like Tom Hanks in any way, there's like a Tom Hanks one that'll play. But like if it's not that movie, then I don't think I've seen it. Like it's weird. Some movies I still see it with, some movies I don't, and it feels a little weird after going to, not a ton of movies like we used to, but like, probably a half a dozen movies or so since I would call, my personal timeline of feeling safe going out, right? So like after seeing like 6 movies or so, still seeing that shit is just like, okay, right, thanks guys. Like it felt weird the first time. This just feels real weird now. Thanks.
I think the last one that had one of those attached to it was John Wick 4.
Oh,
if
okay.
if
So
my
kind of
memory
recently then
connects. Still recently, but then I don't believe Guardians 3 had one before it.
Yeah.
And then certainly nothing that I saw in June had one before it. But I think it was John Wick 4. And I think that was more the fact of like what John Wick 4 is. Like it tries to be that conversation with the audience. So it kind of made sense when it happened. But still, like, yeah, those were strange before. And honestly, on one level, maybe they should still be happening. Because after the June that we've had, I am really nervous for movie theaters, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Like,
what they need to be doing is saying thank you for coming to the movies theaters still, because we understand that the last few months have been kind of shit output.
Yeah. Like, it's just the fact that we did not get to touch on this because the numbers were not firmed up yet. The fact that Spider-Verse was the first film that came out in June, was beaten when Rise of the Beast came out, was beaten by Flash when Flash came out, but still was in the number 2 spot both of those weekends. And then the like breather weekend before Indiana Jones, Spider-Verse took the top spot again.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I mean, that never happens, especially not for animated movies. The idea that an animated movie was number 1, fell, and then climbed back up is unheard of.
Yeah. And then like one step further than that is Elemental, which was like Disney was shitting its pants. We got to destroy Pixar. Oh my God, what have we done? Because it got beaten by The Flash. It beat The Flash in its second weekend to be the number 2 movie in the box office.
Yeah, Elemental's doing okay. It's going to end up being like Onward. It's going to be that weird one that everybody talks about how they didn't like it for one reason or another, but it's still going to be just fine. Like it's going to make its ducats and everybody will move on okay from that one.
Yeah.
It's not the disaster that everybody thought it was going to be, for sure. On the other hand, now that you've mentioned it twice, I do think it's time that we at least nod to the fact that, man, The Flash fell on its face, huh?
The latest thing that I read is it would have lost less money if it had never released. If they had Batgirled it, it would have been less of a financial loss.
I mean,
man,
that's a rough one to even consider. But the one that hit me real hard is somebody pointed out that right now, Black Adam has pretty much outdone every DC movie that's come out since.
Yeah, I was the somebody who pointed that out to you.
No, it was like a tweet going around on Reddit. Like,
oh, okay.
Like,
we talked about it last Sunday, though.
I believe the exact meme is somebody should just let The Rock cook next time.
That's true. I agree.
Because of all of his hullabaloo about how he was going to be the one to lead the next wave of DC, and everybody gave him all this shit because the movie was not super well received, but at least it still made some fucking money. And then like every movie since then has fallen on its face, and people were just like, man, maybe we should just let The Rock run WB. Like,
yeah, that would have been an interesting
we have not seen anything actually come out of the whole like gun relationship yet, because like that's going to change things once we actually see what they are now doing. We haven't seen new DC yet, essentially, right? Like this is all runoff remnants of the old DC, and the fact that like we haven't seen anything new yet is an important factor, because who knows, maybe they could come out with what's the Superman Resurgence, what's the next one being called? Superman
I don't even know,
Reborn, or like I'm this is not me shitting on it. Like,
no, I understand that. I don't.
Yeah,
everybody's been talking about it.
Right, when that one comes out and everybody, could gush all over it and talk about how this is going to be the thing that saves the DC film franchise, like then maybe we're back to talking about DC being on top again. But right now, when Black Adam, a moderately kind of received movie, like a mediocre film by many account, is the kind of financially kicking the shit out of every movie they put out since, it says something.
Superman Legacy is the name of the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Superman Legacy, yeah.
Yeah, it's something. But, these were the movies. These were the movies that, after Spider-Man, my ride got delayed. So I was sitting in one of those lounges you talk about at the theaters. And the other 2 people in the theater lounge with me were the manager of the theater I was at and a regional manager. And they were talking about how it's great that we got 3 weeks with 3 big movies, but they're going to eat themselves, right? None of these movies are going to get to do what Super Mario Brothers did, which is our only profitable film so far this year. They're going to get their week, and then they're going to be forgotten. And that's what our summer looks like. And honestly, I don't think we're going to do the numbers based on a bunch of 1 week of interest films coming out.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, it kind of hurt my heart to overhear that. And then, you know, what naturally was sort of set up for The Flash to have 2 weeks, for it to go back to Spider-Man, was insane to me. Absolutely insane. And I haven't looked at anything about Indiana Jones because, last thing on the topic of Dial of Destiny, I'm really looking for somebody to discuss Dial of Destiny with. Somebody who has seen it, that I can have a discussion with them about I'm going to call them complicated thoughts about the film. Without question, the adjective I would use to describe Dial of Destiny is excellent. It is an excellent film. Does not change the fact that I have thoughts. Yeah. And I'm looking for somebody to, like, go through those thoughts with.
I mean, you know, I feel like you're talking about the entire, like, indie franchise at that point, right? Like, you pointed out yourself that Raiders is, like, kind of the one for you. And, like, I think that there'd be a lot of complicated thoughts people have about Temple of Doom, have about Last Crusade, have about Crystal Skull, right? So I can definitely understand where you're coming from in that regard. As somebody that, like, does thoroughly enjoy all of those movies, that franchise is something that I did grow up on. Like, even I, like, have complicated thoughts about the Indiana Jones franchise in some ways, and the ways in which, you know, it explores and treats some stuff in weird ways, doesn't age very well. Also, like, why did they make this decision even then to do this? And, like, you know, it's always also kind of always been at the whim of the market. Like, you know, like I Spielberg not touching this one is maybe the best news that I've gotten ever about this movie. Like, when we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, when we were mentioning that Mangold was actually the one that directed it and Spielberg produced it, but, like, pretty much was, like, hands off with it. Like, that's great, because I'm having some real trouble with Steven Spielberg right now as a creative, and the ways in which he seems to want to shit all over, like, the movie system that he had a real big hand in creating. Like,
yeah, no, and to turn
anyway.
a classic movie news, that he's going to be, like, responsible now for the cultivation. Where did I see that? I want to know the other 2 names.
I mean, so Martin Scorsese, him and
I think
not Nolan.
It's Anderson.
Was it? Sorry.
It's Anderson.
Wes
Paul
Anderson,
Thomas
right?
Anderson.
Not Wes Anderson. No, Paul S. Thomas or something.
Paul Thomas Anderson.
Paul Thomas Anderson, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the 3 of them, like, going to Zavzlov because of all of the firings at TMC, right? Is that the story you're talking about?
Turner Classic Movies, TCM, not TMC.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That, like, Spielberg, Scorsese,
not TCM. You're talking about the Country Music Channel. What are you doing?
No, I'm talking about TCM,
Movies?
Turner Classic Movies. Turner Classic Movies. Spielberg, Scorsese, and Anderson have swooped in to save Turner Classic Movies.
I thought TCM was the Country Music Channel.
CMT is the Country Music
CMT,
Channel.
Thank you. That's where
Country Music Television is CMT. TCM is Turner Classic Movies, and TMC is the Movie Channel.
Yeah, there it is.
This was fun for me. All these anagrams.
Because of all the stuff happening at Turner Classic Movies and about how there was a bunch of firings and they're reworking some stuff, and, you know, with everything that we have seen them touch so far, I can imagine that a bunch of film buffs out there would be like, what the fuck are they doing, right? Like, I was worried when I heard about it. You know, I don't have as much stock in it though as a guy like Scorsese does, so, like
I mean, Turner Classic Movies is the first place I saw Catwoman. So that's what I'm going to say. That's just going to be my statement about TCM.
When did you see Catwoman on that
2007? What, like 3 years after the movie came out. So I think that works.
You sure that wasn't AMC?
No, it was not AMC. It was Turner Classic Movies.
Because
Maybe it
that's
was
not a movie
AMC.
made by the Turners, and at that point wasn't classic. So I don't
Maybe it
like
was
that's not how that
AMC.
channel
Either
works.
way,
Yeah, that's not how that channel
calling
works.
it a
Like,
classic seemed like
yeah,
a choice that I did not fully understand.
yeah. I mean, maybe somebody out there could verify what kind of movies they put on there. But like the last thing I saw on there was like arsenic and old lace. So like,
Yeah, no. I mean, Turner Classic Movies are the ones that Dale and I were gifted these like hard metal silver cards that got us into all of their Fathom events for a year. And that was awesome. That was like one of the coolest things ever. It's when I fell in love with Ben. Can't think of his last name. Mankiewicz. Ben Mankiewicz. When I fell in love with Ben Mankiewicz is when I was a little starstruck because the woman that I had made friends with at a Doug Loves Movies, who like I would eventually buy her tickets from when she couldn't come, is a host on that channel now. So like that was cool.
yeah. So like the most recent movie that they are playing on Turner Classic Movies today is from 1980. It's called Inside Moves, and that one's not on until like 11 o'clock at night. Everything else is 1946, 1938, 1942, 1959. So if you saw, I'm not saying you didn't see Catwoman, Halle Berry's classic Catwoman on this channel in 2007, but it sure don't fit in with what they're doing nowadays, which I think was kind of their point.
Which, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. You know what? I'll check it. I made a little pithy comment about it. So let's see.
Yeah.
I can look up my pithy comments from the past because
But
we
yeah,
live
I
in the
mean,
internet world.
so Scorsese, I mean, yeah, God, can you imagine those three like knocking on your door, like PTA and Spielberg, and then like Scorsese, who has to be the Joe Pesci of that Goodfellas group, right? Like,
Why am I
and he's
funny?
like
Well,
losing
you
his
made
shit, and Spielberg's like,
silence. I don't.
calm down, we're just gonna talk to him, and he's like, nah, let me at him.
Oh, that's so weird.
Am I a joke to you?
Am I
Do
a
look like
joke to
clown?
you? Well, you directed Silence. I have to bring up Silence again, and I love Silence, but a lot of people didn't understand that movie. All right, just searching Catwoman, but no, it's one of those situations that it's out there, and I don't get it. Like them taking that over and everything there. So yeah, James Mangold taking over. You're right. It is one of those moments where I'm like, oh well, yeah, I'll go see a new Indiana Jones. It's
Yeah,
not
like, I
Spielberg.
don't know.
Like,
Also, I want to clarify, I was not under the impression that they were doing anything in terms of taking it over, but just that they were reassured that things were going to be okay, that they just kind of walked in the room because they were just like, what the fuck are you doing? This is an important part of film history. I think Scorsese's exact like story was that like he puts it on when he's doing editing and like after shot work, and he just like it influences the ways in which he makes movies and stuff like that, which is a big thing for a guy like Scorsese to say that this is a thing that influences the way his films turn out. I was not under the impression that they were then given the reins, but I mean maybe more news has come out since then.
okay, so I can't find it, and I'll just move away from it. Maybe it was AMC. That actually sounds like it makes more sense.
That makes a lot more sense because AMC, pretty infamously for the last 20 years, has moved away from the classic movies to, because it's an American movie classic, they can do whatever the fuck
We can
they
call
want.
it whatever we want.
Right.
As long as it's got guns in it, it's an American movie classic.
I might sign up for the Turner Classic Movie Wine Club. What is this?
I know
Okay,
Turner
maybe
Classic
not.
Movies. Like when you look at it, I want to go on their cruise.
Yeah, they've got a.
I want to go to their like Comic-Con event that happens in LA in August. Turner Classic Movies is very interesting to me. And like I feel like I'm a man of a certain age who can like enjoy it without like being scoffed at. Until they find out that we have a podcast and that this was one of the topics of the podcast. But yeah.
No, I mean it's one of those things where the conversation itself is a really interesting one because as a guy like Scorsese talks about like it being influential and it being important, and like we're sitting here talking about all the cool shit that we would love to do that's connected to it and stuff. It is a big like money sink, right? Like for this company, like that is part of the reason why they supposedly laid off like half the staff there and stuff like that, is that it doesn't make profit. But the argument is, and I think this is what those three made clear when they were going to Zaslav, is like it shouldn't be about that. That shouldn't be the measure of this particular thing's success. And I would argue that like we need to do that with a lot of things in this world. But as this is the conversation and these are the guys having it, like clearly this is where their focus is, right? Like who cares that TCM is not making bank for Turner, you know, like AT&T, Time Warner, whatever the fucking thing they call it now. Warner Discovery, is that what they call it?
Yeah, I think it's Warner Discovery or Discovery
Yeah, what
Warner.
like
It's that order
like
of words.
the argument being like that's not the point of having a channel like Turner Classic Movies existing in the world is like I think an important conversation. And again, I think we should have that about a lot of things that seem to be affected by the fact that they don't make money. But like that seems to be like the number one thing nowadays that really seems to be the catalyst for a lot of conversations. A lot more people are at least talking about why do we measure success by the cash value, right? And like to bring it back down to the real world, the conversation that you overheard of two guys that run a movie theater saying, I don't know if we can keep this place fucking open if we don't get more people in seats and more and you know and movies making more money and blah blah blah. Because I'm sure part of it for the theater is that I'm sure part of their deals are once a movie makes a certain amount of money, they probably get more percentage, right? Because that's how a lot of these types of deals work. Is that like if a movie is successful, then you know a rising tide raises all ships. Everybody makes a little bit more cash, whether it's baseline because you're just getting a flat percentage the whole time. But more what happens with these movies is once the movie makes its money back, contracts change wildly, which is why so many people get upset about like where a movie ends up, how it ends up on streaming versus going straight to video versus going into a theater for a bit. Like, is that people have contracts based entirely around the success of the film in a certain context. And if it isn't given the opportunity to succeed there, then their contract is fucked. And like that's where so many of these conversations with artists today are coming from in regards to this. It's where the whole writer's strike comes into play. It's where everything that we heard about with Scarlett Johansson and like the streaming rights and why so many people are now taking on the title of creator as opposed to like director or anything like that. Like there's so much tied up in how well a movie does financially that that's the only way to talk about movies anymore, and that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't understand. Like how Men in Black is still not making a profit after being a wicked profitable movie when you look at the accounting.
Like, well, what's weird is it depends what context you want. That's the other thing is that when you can talk about it not being profitable in this one particular context that screws somebody out of the rights that they're owed for that movie, but then turn around and in another conversation talk about how successful that franchise is to the point where they tried to reboot the damn thing to keep it going. Like you don't get to do that. You don't get to play both hands. Like, which is it? Is this movie a dumpster fire, or is this movie something that you want to hold up?
Yeah, it's such a weird industry. Entertainment now. I mean, anything else about the writer's strike other than the fact that the big news this week, there is nothing going on in LA anymore?
Yeah, I mean we're getting closer and closer to the Screen Actors Guild joining them. Like they have not officially yet, but all signs are pointing to the actors eventually about to go on strike with them. Fingers crossed that does actually happen, because after what happened with the Directors Guild, these guys need a little bit more support from their peers. God damn it. Like, I cannot believe the Directors Guild basically was like, we want something, and then they were just basically given a pat on the back, and they were like, okay, that's what we wanted, and then they just walked out of the room. And it's like, thanks, guys. You were real helpful.
Well, I don't even know how to take that. Like, we just talked about what Scorsese, Spielberg, and P.T. Anderson were able to do. Paul Thomas Anderson. P.T. Anderson is different. Like, directors have all the power in Hollywood. Is just the fact of it. And I don't know, like, do you want to jeopardize that power? I mean, you should, right? You should want everybody to succeed. But it is this situation where once you become a director, why do you need anybody else?
Well, right. I mean, then we're running into issues with the concept of like the auteur, right? And like who is the creative artist? Because like, I mean, famously, look at a guy like Tarantino. Famously had issues with all of the other unions in Hollywood, right? Him and Robert Rodriguez got into a fuck ton of shit with Dusk Till Dawn, right? where the movie almost got shut down like towards the end of production because of the ways in which that they were mistreating crew members and stuff. And like, if you watch any of the behind the scenes stuff and they interview those guys, they'll talk about how the crew that was there loved what they were doing. The problem was that the union reps were coming in and claiming that people were being mistreated. And it's like, well, if they're agreeing to it, is it really mistreatment? And it's like, yes. Like, is the answer to that question, you idiot. like just because somebody can smile while they're eating shit doesn't mean they want to be eating shit. I wouldn't risk my job either. I don't know what you expect. It's such a
Plus,
weird.
Plus, they were like in Mexico, right? Like, wasn't that famously shot on location? So if you get fired from that job, what are you gonna do? How are you getting back?
There's all sorts of like stuff about the way that movie was made that in retrospect is like insane, right? And that's one of the big things that we've really learned about guys like Tarantino is that like they were lauded and celebrated in the 90s for their auteur filmmaking, and really what we've come to understand is that they're just raging assholes, right? And we happen to like the product that they make at the end, so we allow them to continue being these raging assholes. And like I will say that to the end of my days, because like he is the reason that Uma Thurman doesn't work anymore, because he almost killed her on the set of Kill Bill, right? Like there's all this weird shit about like what we're willing to allow directors to do that puts them in this position that they can do things like this, right? And so do they get involved with a writer's strike? Well, a guy like Tarantino probably doesn't, right? Because at the end of the day, he writes all of his own shit. So like, he's not part of the writers union as far as I know. Maybe he is. He's definitely part of DAG though, isn't he?
He is definitely a part of the Directors Guild. It is, I don't know. Like, that's the other thing, is that a lot of the path to being a director now is generally built on either being an actor or a writer. But then once you cross into that, you don't stop being those things, but you now have that title. Yeah. It's the exact thing of like Shonda Rhimes having that whole thing on like one of the shows right when the writer's strike started, and it totally felt as if it was probably ABC, because they have the ticket to Shonda Rhimes, right? That's where Shondaland is. That's where
Shondaland is. Yeah, between Netflix and ABC, I think that they're.
Well, if it's going to be a broadcast thing, it'd probably be an ABC show, right?
Yeah, right.
But regardless of where it landed, it felt like it was one of those types of propaganda to say that like the writers are complaining, but why? Look how much Shonda Rhimes makes. They don't need more money. And it's like, yeah, but the reason she makes that stuff is because she went on to become a producer, and she has actual shit in the game, and that like she's directing some of her projects now. So like she's no longer just a writer. She's not just in the Writers Guild. She's in the higher title guilds, and that's where she's making that money from. Like if you're like Kevin Smith, right, famously writes, acts, directs all of his programs, he's going to call himself a director, though.
Right.
Because then he gets all of the privileges of being a director in Hollywood.
Right.
I don't know. It's just a really wacky thing. And I do hope that the actors stand by, because that'll be the closest way to actually find a resolution.
Yeah. I mean, we are looking at Disney had to announce 3 projects that they've had to put on hold now because they don't have any writers on it. Like, I mean, the new Daredevil series.
Yeah.
I mean, my fingers are crossed that thing fucking happens, because it seems like one of the ones closest to the chopping block if they need to start cutting some projects back because of all of this. And like, I'm not ever going to hold the Writers Guild or the strike responsible for that, but I mean, it's going to be, that will be the moves that Disney will make in order to try and make, can you imagine them putting that sacrificial lamb up to try and turn everybody against the strike? Like, well, because of the strike, we couldn't give you the new Daredevil reboot. Like, God damn it.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. I know there are people in my life that
will turn around and like adamantly talk about how the writers killed that show if that's what happens.
Well, I feel really strange about another Denzel Washington Equalizer film coming out, as the Equalizer on television starring Queen Latifah is like 3 seasons deep and was renewed for season 3 and 4 at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, because they knew that you were getting a season 3 and a season 4, they left off season 3 on a huge cliffhanger. I'm talking the kind of cliffhanger that we used to see when a show was trying to coerce the network into getting a new season.
Yeah.
But like with the added benefit of we know we're already getting a season 4. But then I hear new Equalizer movie and I see what's going on. I don't think it would be very difficult for them to just get rid of that show. And the end of that show be this cliffhanger that like, what the fuck is gonna happen?
Yeah, I mean, it is that one gets really weird because it is loosely based on like an old TV show, so like the creative concepts behind it, you don't necessarily like aren't attributed to anybody. It's a whole other kettle of fish for me because of the idea being that like they're just kind of somebody walks in the room and writes an Equalizer plot for an 80s TV show, and they're like, well, we'll put Denzel Washington in this one and we'll make it a movie. We'll put Queen Latifah in this one, it'll be an episode of the show. Like it is in this really weird realm of like, there isn't like a particular person I associate with the Equalizer because of the fact that it is this like remake.
Right, exactly. But it's one of those situations where if the Denzel Washington third movie comes out and does gangbusters, and we need something to cut for CBS, well, we can cut this one, right? Because this isn't relevant anymore in wake of that movie.
I mean, part of me was kind of wondering if this was going to be the one, like if Queen Latifah was going to show up in the movie. Like,
I kept expecting Denzel Washington to show up in the show. Like, and I know that that'd be crazy for it to happen, but it just was one of those situations where I have someone...
I think you're much more likely to get Queen Latifah to agree to show up for a cameo in the movie than you ever are to get Denzel Washington to agree to be on television.
I don't disagree with that situation, but every time they're like, I have somebody that I can call, and, well, everybody that we know in the show already exists, like, this is your time to tie this to the movie. And this audience that you've cultivated over the past 3 years of the show who never cared about the movies might then go care about the movies. And I know that that's crazy. But, like, they also did John Q as a plot of an episode of The Equalizer. And that felt so fucking crazy. Because I'm like, this is a Denzel Washington movie, and it's the plot of this episode of the show. While the movie was initially set to release later this year. This is insane to me. And I'm with people in the house who I've watched John Q with. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, guy takes ER hostage to get his kid's surgery? That's what John Q is about.
Yeah, no, they knew what they were doing when they did that.
There's
no way
they have to have. So, like, and that's far more likely in terms of trying to recalibrate your mind to Denzel Washington as the Equalizer than him ever showing up. But when the season finale of the third season, this was before I knew that it had a 3 and 4 order at the same time, was like, I have one more person that I can call. I'm like, is there any chance that it could be him? Because who else would it be? There's literally no one else that we know in the show.
The real hope would be that the call goes in and like fucking Ed Woodward shows up. He's probably dead, but like that would be phenomenal if the tie-in is actually to the
original
series.
Equalizer. Yeah, it would have been cool. And then it just ended on a cliffhanger, and who knows what's gonna happen if season 4 ever happens.
Yeah.
Like, it's just... We've also recently started watching the episodes of Bob Hearts Abishola that we missed when my father was in the hospital. And, like, the tail end of season 4, they really put into effect their whole, we only have 2 main characters on this show. Everyone else is either a featured or recurring character.
Right.
Because, like, they had, at one point... I think 8 recurring characters in the show. So, like, the budget for that show had ballooned nearly out of control. So the way that they could say, we'll give you a 5th season is this. And they really started to, like, test that with the tail end of season 4.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, it's weird to be like, where are all these people that this show about family used to be there? Why is only...
I mean,
like,
you got that though in like shows like Modern Family, I think of when like the kids really started to come up into their own, and they were like, shit, we can't afford to have like four more main players, right? So then like they write off like this one's off at work today, this one's at college, this one's this one's on vacation. So like you see these weird episodes where they're like missing like four or five people. But the difference is on a show like that, the ensemble is so big that you write out four or five people for the day, you still have five more people to lean on, right?
Right.
I can't believe that they limited it to two people on that show is the big one.
Bob and Abishola will be the only main characters for a shortened season 5 that is a send-off. I don't know how you do it. And then, Modern Family, like, historically, Haley wasn't at her grandfather's funeral. And I can't think of the actor's name, but she was like, I didn't even get a call. I watched the series and found out that her grandfather had died.
Fred Ward, right?
Fred Willard.
Yeah.
It was the grandfather. Fred Ward is a different actor.
Sorry, say the name again. I missed it.
Fred Willard?
Out on me.
Willard.
Thank you. Yes. Fred Willard. Yeah. From like the all the Christopher Guest films and shit, right?
Sarah Hyland. It was Sarah Hyland who's like, I didn't know that my fictional grandfather had passed away in the show until I saw the episode, and then was like, that's weird. Why wasn't I at my grandfather's funeral?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, so that thing definitely does exist, but Bob Hart's Abishola seems to be taking it to an extreme. And to an extreme that I wonder, is it something that's going to happen now with a writer's strike?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or is it just become like a sacrificial lamb? Like, that's where my mind is going. Like, I talked last week about Magnum P.I., and you're right, it's the first one that really affected me, but it was also the one that cited specifically the writer's strike as the final decision.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it's just such a weird time right now. Like, Hollywood seems to be kind of falling apart. I can't think of any other movies that are coming out besides Oppenheimer and Barbie and Mission Impossible Part 1 of 2.
I mean, you say that, but that's 3 movies. Is that not enough for the summer? God.
No. Well, I guess, and then Ninja Turtles. That's 4. Right. So, like,
right. And that gets you straight up into the fall season, at which point we start talking about, like, Killers of the Flower Moon and, like, like, here's the thing, is, like, it feels like not much has been affected, but when I think about like that conversation that you overheard, this idea being that like there's so much coming out that it's all eating itself right now. Like the problem is that when a dozen movies are slated to come out and then something like this happens and it pushes back 5 or 6, as I just said, you kind of don't notice when there's 5 more things around. Like you just, it gets kind of lost in that, right? Because like if I can think of 5 more movies to see for the rest of the year, then I'm probably pretty set on my going to the movies for the rest of the year.
Right. I suppose what it comes down to is that they used to be like your action movie, your comedy, your kids film. That would be a Friday release. And the way that it has warped and changed is one film comes out each week.
Yeah.
As opposed to like those 3 so that there's something for everybody. That doesn't happen anymore. So then that like cannibalization they're talking about Spider-Man is your kids movie, like Transformers is your big like blockbuster, and then you have your superhero movie, as opposed to those all coming out like one weekend before.
Yeah, and they're being different. Yeah.
Like Oppenheimer and Barbie coming out on the same day is the smartest thing in the world to me. Like, and it seems like that's how it used to be, but it's not what happens anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And like, I'd see both of them. I'd do a double feature. Have you seen the shirts online that are like 2 shirts stitched together?
Well, you heard somebody talk to Cillian Murphy about Oppenheimer coming out against Barbie, and he was like, how do you feel about that? And he was like, people can see two movies in their life. Like he didn't he like people kept trying to make it like a head-to-head thing, and everybody involved has just been like, we want everybody to succeed. What the hell is wrong with you people?
Yeah, that was my favorite. Well, and I think the narrative stems from Tom Cruise being all upset that like Mission Impossible was set for that date, and then Oppenheimer and Barbie were also set for that date. So then, in order for Tom Cruise to get what he wanted, they had to schedule Mission Impossible a week earlier. And as a result of that, and what Oppenheimer had going into it, Tom Cruise is only going to have 1 week on IMAX for Mission Impossible 7.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like, he's not happy about it. So then, naturally, if one party in this whole thing is unhappy, the other parties have to be unhappy too. And it's like, no, like, you see Oppenheimer, you see Barbie to make yourself feel better. Hopefully. Maybe.
I don't know, man. Some of those previews for Barbie are making me
pretty dark, right?
Existential film, then. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm excited. Like, it is. Like, there's this
super excited. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But, like, how I relate to movies now is just so different. And Indiana Jones, like, in the past, it wouldn't have even been a thought of, like, am I going to see this movie or not? And then it ends up seeing it, and then I'm like, oh, wow, now I really need to look at this in a way.
I think anybody that has listened to this show for any lengthy amount of time would have known, like, pre-pandemic, we were already kind of, you and I were kind of on this precipice of, like, how are we going to continue our relationship with film, right? There's so much changing between the streaming stuff that's out there and the ways in which movie theaters are now and the movies getting made. Like, we cannot continue to exist in this relationship with film in the same way, right? And then the pandemic came along and just knocked us off of that, like, fence. And we're still not quite sure which side we fell, right?
I mean, I was only seeing movies pre-pandemic because of the AMC deal. Mm-hmm. The fact that I could pay, I think it was like $20 a month and see 3 movies a week for that $20 a month. And often I would leave a movie on the table, but Thursday nights I would go and I would see 2 movies. Like, that was my standing Thursday plans. But really, that was taking the movie theaters and turning them into a streaming service, making them a subscription-based service that I was taking a part in. Mm-hmm. That's the only way that I could keep it going.
Well, and that was kind of their only plan to evolve the movie-going experience. Like, when that fell on its face, you notice that we really haven't had anything since then, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the move that movie theaters can make in order to be profitable again? And I don't have an answer for that question, but, like, that is the question currently, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, MoviePass keeps threatening to come back into the world. And I don't know how they would ever do that.
Yeah, MoviePass keeps popping up in the mouth of, like, all of these, like, influencers and, like, nepo babies that, like, I have $6 million to kick around. What am I gonna do? Let's try bringing MoviePass back, and then they end up $6 million in the hole afterwards, and they're like, it was the biggest mistake for me to even touch this. It's like invoking the words MoviePass. Somehow your bank account just starts draining instantly.
Yeah, I don't know. The fact that I get the emails like, sign up for the waiting list, and I'm like, I'll sign up, but I'm not going to hold my breath because I feel like I'll be waiting to exhale for the rest of my life.
Well, you're the one that keeps killing it, and you keep signing up, and then they're like, oh, Devin signed up, and then they look at your history with MoviePass, and they're like, he's the reason we go under.
Yes! I think I'm doing them a service. I mean, yeah, that week I saw 7 movies on my MoviePass. Still, like, something that I'm a huge fan of. Like, personal achievement unlocked.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird that they just kind of assumed, like, in an age where there's a legal, like, precedent for everything, right? To bookend all of this shit back to the terms of service stuff. The fact that, like, there was not something in the TOS of that said something like, you only get to see 1 movie a month or something. You know, like, I think about those cards that you can get where it's like free Subway for life or free McDonald's for life, and then you look at them and it's like you have the right to 1 hamburger a week for the next 30 weeks, and you're like, that's not really McDonald's for life, is it? But, like, that's what you signed up for. Like, that's what you got, and then it's clearly stated that's what it is. I just can't believe there wasn't anything like that with MoviePass. Like, as much as they touted the whole, you can see what, any movie you want, blah blah blah. And like, I'm surprised that when you got that shit together, that you didn't realize it was like one free movie like a week or a month or something like that.
So yeah, what it came down to is what I did was read the terms and conditions and like looked for the loophole, and it wasn't like that big a loophole. It was just, you can see a movie in a 24-hour period. So a 24-hour period starts at the showtime of the movie that you see. So if I could see a 9 a.m. film, I couldn't sign up for another film until 9 a.m. the next day, 9:01 the next day.
Technically, right.
Technically. So like, that's how their system worked. And then the other thing around it was you couldn't use MoviePass to see the same movie twice. So it's not like I could go to the 9 o'clock Norm of the North and then see the 10 o'clock Norm of the North the next day. So like, those were the terms and conditions that I was working inside of. Now, what they should have done then is that it's tied to a theater. Because if they tied me to like a specific theater, I could have never done what I did.
Yeah.
But what I ended up doing was, on a Sunday, there was a theater in Connecticut that did an 8 a.m. showing of a movie that I wanted to see. So I saw that movie at 8 a.m. So it didn't matter that I wasn't going to see another movie on Monday until 2 in the afternoon. So then I did that, and then I was just able to find local theaters that had different showings. Yeah. And it totally worked within the terms and conditions. But they messed up because like, it wasn't tied to a specific theater that I attended, right? Which would have been one way to circumvent that. And there was no max. Like, it wasn't max 4 movies in a week. It was just in a 24-hour period based upon the showtimes.
Yeah. But then I'm sure somebody does that math and figures, well, if we start limiting people A, B, and C, blah, 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 then really they're only getting 4 movies a year. And then they're like, what's the price of this thing that is only letting you go to 4 movies a year?
Yeah, exactly. It just
doesn't work. Like, I think we've discovered that. I think we've discovered that the MoviePass system is just kind of not the way to go. But man, they can't seem to get past that to move on to the next thing.
Well, their big marketing thing was every 24 hours you can see a movie. So they also kind of called attention to the fact that, like, this is how you game our system.
Yeah.
Because that was remember when they came back and it was like $20 a month for MoviePass? And that was when they died. Because a bunch of people signed up for it and a bunch of people were seeing like 5 movies in a week.
Right.
And it's because you also pointed out how people defeat you. You called people in with a low price and then said, and oh, by the way, here's our weak point. And
I mean, I think that the hope was that you, in doing that, since you weren't spending money on a ticket, maybe you'd spend money on like concessions and stuff. But we have grown so accustomed to not bothering with concessions at a movie theater. Right? Like, it's like a rare treat where I'm like, you know what? I will get popcorn this time. My 6th movie outing this year, I think I will actually put the money down to get a popcorn this time. But only a small. No, I do not need the 25 cents extra large. Thank you.
Well, the crazy thing about that is, I don't even know, like, I can't believe we're talking about MoviePass in 2023. But it is a thing. I just got another email about, like, the wait list is coming up. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I want to, like, get the information, is that MoviePass was paying directly for the tickets from the theater.
Yes.
So the whole hope that from them was that eventually they'd be doing so much volume with the movie theaters that they would end up getting a discount on the tickets. Like, the bulk buy of all that. Like, your concessions and stuff, that money, there's no way it would go to MoviePass. It would only go to the movie theater. So then, like, what MoviePass has to do, if they're trying to present to, like, why this is viable, is say, you give us, like, a 25% off on the tickets, because look at how much money is going directly to you from the concessions.
Right.
But even then, it's like, yeah, but that concession money is coming whether we charge you full price for the tickets or give you that 25% off on the tickets. So where's our real incentive for that?
Right. Why would we keep this up? Right.
Yeah.
It's a fucking mess. Like I said, I think we've learned.
Oh yeah, we've learned it.
That the experiment has failed. Right. Like this is not a thing that we should keep trying. But like I said, you get somebody with enough money in their hands, and it seems like nowadays, like, at least one person a year is just like, I think I'm gonna look into this movie pass stuff, right? Like it's basically like it's a less dangerous form of investment than, say, like a crypto nowadays, right? Because you get involved in like a crypto thing and like you're either going to lose your money, which is like actually not the worst thing that could happen in that regard, because the other thing could be that you may find out that you're actually like giving money to Somalian pirates or some shit. Like you get called out on like how your thing out there with crypto is actually like, you know, going out and attacking grandmas at night, and you're just like, what the fuck? No, I'd get my money out of this stat, and then you get sued, and that sucks, and your reputation's in the fucking hole. Whereas with MoviePass, if it fails, it fails. But then you don't realize how bad it's gonna fail, and you end up owing some company like $2 million, and you're just like, what?
Why did I think using my $6 million to buy hundreds of people movie tickets would be profitable? It's literally the underpants gnomes thing.
Yeah.
Step 1, buy people movie tickets with my $6 million. Step 2, right. Step 3, profit. No, but what's the step 2? How are you buying movie tickets for people supposed to be profitable?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, it's just a weird time for entertainment. Up, down, left, right. Which I guess, like, let's talk video games for like the next 15 minutes real quick. Like, we don't have to go for like ever, but you had a big milestone happen in Tears of the Kingdom, and I found a new game for this weekend, and I'd like to share those as well as maybe a good thing to head out on. So
yeah, I fully expect to be done with Tears of the Kingdom by the end of this this vacation, you know, with the holiday and stuff. I currently am basically in the pit beneath Hyrule Castle. I dropped I dropped a quick travel down there and like hopped back to my home base so that I could cook up some more food before I go into the final fight. Like, that's essentially where I'm at right now.
That thing that I found a week into the game and then didn't want to leave.
And the hole that you fall down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, you kept saying you stumbled upon this. It's pretty fucking clear where you're going. Like, I don't know what you meant by stumbling into this. You had to know exactly what you were doing.
I know. I stumbled into it, CJ, because I thought I was just exploring the depths. I thought I was going to find some light roots and stuff. And then suddenly...
First of all, you could tell where the light roots. Anyway, we're not going to argue about your apparent inability to read a situation because, like, there is like 5 moments where like you get stopped and the game says something to you. Like, that doesn't happen anywhere else in the depths. Why would you not realize maybe this is an important area?
I'd only been playing the game for like a week.
Yeah, but you know where the game starts, where the opening scene is. Everything is. It is so telegraphed. It's not even like this isn't even a joke for a guy that seems to be able to sight read every video game in the world. I don't know how you dropped the ball so hard on this one.
And then like I got there, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this makes sense. But like now I feel challenged and I feel like I need to beat it. I bet I can beat it with my 4 hearts and a dream.
Yeah, so like, so that's where I currently at. But part of me getting to this, like my journey to this, is that I wanted to get every shrine done, every light root, like all that sort of stuff, right? And yeah, that game, like the narrative of that game gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more that I go, and it reached whole new levels of like depth and like curiosity and head scratching, like what have I, like, holy shit, what have I been doing this whole time? Like, in my entire history of The Legend of Zelda, what have I been doing? Like, I had moments like that when I finished the shrines and the prize at the end is revealed, and like kind of what that means in terms of the narrative of the game. Like, there was just all of this shit that hit me this week. And I finally, after kind of that happening and me taking some stuff in and doing a couple of other small missions that I just wanted to get out of the way because like I felt like I was still tied to them. Like I have finally hit a moment after 130 hours with that game that I'm like, okay, it's time for me to end this. And yeah, like the prize reveal for the end of getting the shrines in this one is pretty intense, especially compared to Breath of the Wild. And I think that's my biggest takeaway because I mean, I'm not done with Tears of the Kingdom yet. Like I said, I still have a big boss fight left, but that's pretty much all I have left. And so I'm pretty comfortable in talking about this in regards to, like, you know, compared to. And I cannot believe, as much as I loved Breath of the Wild, still love Breath of the Wild, I can't believe how much that really was just a demo for Tears of the Kingdom. There is so much in Breath of the Wild that carries over into Tears of the Kingdom and is improved upon or like left out because it just didn't work after Breath of the Wild. And like all of this stuff, like I went back to Breath of the Wild a couple of days ago just because I have some friends in the house that are still playing that one, and so I was watching them play and I was getting this itch to just kind of do something goofy and just run around in a much smaller game, which I cannot believe I'm saying after like spending 200 hours in Breath of the Wild and like thinking it was cool and one of the biggest maps I'd ever played and all blah blah blah. Like I now look at it and I'm just like, man, this is all just a piece of the puzzle for what inevitably comes out in Tears of the Kingdom. And I was thinking back to the ways in which Breath of the Wild was pitched and the ways that it was talked about and how much of that game was left on the cutting room floor before it got in people's hands. Like pretty infamously, they talked a lot about like the early art for Breath of the Wild featuring the floating Hyrule Castle. And about how when you play Breath of the Wild, it's just not there. That's just not the case, right? But then the very first thing you see when you come into Tears of the Kingdom is the floating castle, right? So like there's clearly a lot going on in Tears that is this is what we always wanted to do. Breath of the Wild, we're very proud of that game. It is a complete package. It is finished, but man, Tears of the Kingdom is the game it feels like they had always wanted to have made in the first place. And like that is made abundantly clear when you finish the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom and there's a prize for it, and on top of that, that prize has like narrative impact that is like kind of huge in the whole grand scheme of not just Tears of the Kingdom but also the history of Zelda writ large. And then like looking back on how in Breath of the Wild, I remember finishing the shrines in that and nothing happening, and it being a bit of a letdown after all of the work I had put in, right? Like even just hoping that there'd be like even just like dialogue that really like leaned into the fact that like now that all of the shrines are found, you know you have done A, B, or C, or but no and then later the DLC for Breath of the Wild coming out and them just adding 20 more shrines and there being something at the end of that kind of in for you know like for anybody that didn't play that, I don't really want to spoil it, but there's a new boss fight because you finish the shrines. That's pretty much it. Right? Like there's not much given to you, and it was given to you in DLC. So like it just felt like such an afterthought. Whereas in this, it's so baked in to the narrative of the game. And I'm just like, yeah, this feels complete. Whereas like Breath of the Wild definitely had some holes in it from, you know, after playing it for 200 hours, you do start to pick up on some stuff here or there that is doesn't quite feel like they were able to really push the point they wanted to push. I can't believe how kind of complete Tears of the Kingdom feels comparatively.
Cool. That's very cool to me. We'll talk more on it once you finish the game. I mean, do you want to tell the people that we're going to be talking about it? Probably not next episode, but the episode after that. So what is that? Doing the math. 2
weeks
the
on
16th,
that
July 16th, when we record on the 16th.
I mean, I will definitely be at least finished with the like. There's some stuff that we talked about this last time where like there's definitely some stuff I'm not going to push myself to finish. You know, I'm not going to bother collecting 999 Korok seeds and stuff like that, right? It's just like the big example. But there's also some other minor stuff. Like a lot of side quests in Tears of the Kingdom don't really amount to much other than good narrative stuff, like fun narrative stuff, but essentially you get like 100 rupees at the end and stuff, and it's like great. Maybe you'll get a costume piece, like a rare costume piece, but that's really really rare in those side quests. So I'm not really feeling like an incentive to like go ahead and finish, finding all of the goddess statues for the Gerudo. Like I could go on that quest, but I'm pretty sure the ending of that quest is just here's some rupees. Like, and it's cool narrative for everything that I know about the Gerudo and stuff, but I don't need that right now, right? So I might, after I finish the game, pop back in just to kind of poke around a little bit at some of that sort of stuff. But it's not gonna like affect my overall feelings about what I've already done in this game. Again, after 130 hours, I'm pretty confident I know how I feel about this game and where I stand with it and all that.
Yeah, this is the first time I've been incentivized to go finish the shrines, is the way that you're talking about it. I need to tell you that. I didn't feel that incentive at all. Like,
right.
Especially after Breath of the Wild.
I was doing it as a completionist. Like, there isn't really much in the game that tells you, hey, keep going. But, like, I did it with Breath of the Wild. I was like, I'm definitely doing it with Tears of the Kingdom, especially with them. There's more shrines in this one than there were, because you got all of the sky shrines and stuff too. But so yeah, I wasn't really feeling it either, other than just like the compelling nature of just wanting to complete it. But man, now that I've got it, I've got all of these questions about things going forward and about going back, and yeah, it's wild.
Cool, very cool. That's exciting. I'm excited to hear about it. So yeah, we'll celebrate DTH's birthday with a big discussion about Tears of the Kingdom. So there's your warning that that's coming. And I got to make sure I write a note about it so that we don't forget.
So what was your big find?
So it wasn't a big find. It was a big find when I found it, and then it ended up being like a fun distraction for a day. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to pull me back in to play again. But it's a little Mega Man inspired game. Really, it feels like it was made because of the popularity of Shovel Knight. The game is called Bat Boy. Are you familiar with Bat Boy, Siegen?
Like the Bat Boy? Like
no.
From the National Enquirer Bat Boy?
No, I wish.
Okay.
It is essentially Power Rangers if the Power Rangers were all a different sport. And their leader is Bat Boy, who plays baseball. And then there's like Racket Girl and the Basketeer and Aquaria, who's just all water sports. And I just said those words.
I can see your Shovel Knight comment, but I can also see the Mega Man stuff. I mean, Shovel Knight itself also is influenced heavily by Mega Man.
Right, exactly. So but legitimate moments in the game feel very, we wanted to make our own version of Shovel Knight. Like ways that levels are laid out. When you get to the level Nuts and Bolts, which the boss is like the track star, that whole level feels like Tinker Knight's level. And honestly, there's no like narrative reason. Like track and field sports do not inherently lend themselves to an industrial level. Ditto, like the Basketeer, the basketball themed hero, he is in a haunted manor. And it's like, I don't understand how these two things are supposed to link up. Racket Girl, like really cool the fact that all of the pirate ship flags are a skull and cross rackets.
I mean, it feels like they're dipping their toe into like random like quotes around random humor, right? Like that, it's the Gen Z thing to do, right? Like, why is this happening? Cool, because it is, and it's funny because there's not like a thing to lean on, like that kind of thing, that kind of joke. I don't know. It's hard to explain humor in general. Never mind like Gen Z humor.
Yeah.
But like it feels like that's where that's coming from. Those choices are coming from.
It more feels like, oh, there was the industrial level in Shovel Knight, so now there's the industrial level. There's the fortress, there's the haunted castle level in Shovel Knight, so here's the haunted castle.
But I will say what Shovel Knight does really well is justifies a lot of that in like the creation of the various knights, right? Like the reason that those things exist the way that they do is based around the character. Like you can understand where those concepts came from based on the narrative of Shovel Knight. Like, it's still very silly, but there is an attempt to ground that stuff. But it sounds like they don't do that in Bat Boy. It sounds like it's more just like
like Racket Girl's level is an airship armada a la Propeller Knight, but like why? What does tennis have to do with riding on ships in the air? Like Propeller Knight, every one of these ships is using propellers, be they be vertical or horizontal for thrust or lift. Like, so like it just feels like very weird. Like we were inspired by all of these environments from Shovel Knight and I will tell you, like, disappointing to Devin is the 6th level. And it's a world map like Shovel Knight 2. It's not like Mega Man where you just pick from the 8. So obviously Mega Man plays some of that, but like the same way it does to Shovel Knight. And then if I were going to say, I mean, Shovel Knight's going to be 10 years old this year. So we're getting to that point where like a game whose developers were inspired by Shovel Knight is not only a possibility, but I can tell you it exists. Like that Boy
the
is
kids that grew up on Shovel Knight are now making games, is what you're saying. Yes, for 100%.
Yeah, so and that's what Bat Boy is. Like everybody's saying like Mega Man. Mega Man is the reason why I wanted to play it. But then after playing it, as somebody who played Shovel Knight literally to death in terms of like my DS cart that has struggles to load now, this is what this game is. And I'm not disappointed about that, but it is the fact that like Shovel Knight, they very much like they worked on it and they felt it. And when I first played Shovel Knight, I feel the same way I feel about Bat Boy after first playing it, is that there's a good game here, but it hasn't been refined yet. To the fact that I woke up this morning to an update that added a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I had even waited. It came out in May. It came out May 23rd. I waited a month to let it get refined, and a month wasn't enough time, is just what I found out. Which is not a bad or good thing. It's just a thing that exists with this game.
Wild.
Yeah.
The company that produced it or made it, X Plus.
Yeah, I don't know if they just published it or if they're the creative force behind it.
They have some weird games up on Steam, I'll tell you that. They've got Super Sammy Roll, which looks like it's a combination of Spyro and Monkey Ball, which is like a weird like it's like a collectathon, but then also there's like Monkey Ball-esque physics to it. And then this other one that is like their first one that seems to be up here from 2021, Smelter, which is apparently you play as Eve of Adam and Eve, and you've just left the Garden of Eden, and it's about you like trying to find Adam, but also you have a super suit.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, they've got some weird ones up here. So like it seems like the idea of drawing inspiration and then just getting buck wild with it is kind of just their wheelhouse. Which is, is cool. It's a way to make games. Like I said, I feel like there's a generational kind of gap here in our kind of appreciation for the like weirdness, because like that's just like the way things are now. Like again, the kids that grew up doing this stuff are now in the position to make content, and the content that they're making, it definitely feels like the element of random for the sake of random is a large part of that.
Yeah. I get that. I definitely get that. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about like when you get to the final level and you are running from clones of the character, and like this was just what the final level of Shovel Knight was. Yeah. Like it there's that thin line between homage or ripoff.
Yeah, exactly. Homage bordering on the tail of ripoff, right? Like it's just like, what is this? And like and a bunch of people nowadays just being like, that's fine, that's all I want. I just want more Shovel Knight, so this is fine.
Yeah, and it's like, and the price tag of $15, perfect. If it were any more than $15, I think I'd be presenting this very differently. And I did. I felt compelled to keep playing it. There were those moments where like I need to take a break. I can't keep playing right now because just the thought process behind one of the puzzles I just solved. Because like there's also the collect stuff, like find it. And for the first like 4 levels, it's like a breakable piece of wall. And then once you get to like the 5th level, it's like, oh, this looks like the wall would break, but nothing happened when I hit it. But that's because you can just walk through that wall. Like, that's why it looks strange. Yeah. And it's like, oh, nice. Okay. Like, indications, please. That wasn't a thing before.
I will say that, like, one of the things that's gotten kind of lost with Tears of the Kingdom coming out is how much we both, like, really, like, fell into Death's Door, right?
Yeah.
And there is a lot to be said about how Death's Door seems to be drawing from a lot of the same wells that you're talking about with Bat-Boy, but, like, really worked for us. Because the ways in which things just happen in that game or just are the way they are in that game, because it's Dark Souls-esque, because there's a Zelda element to it, because these other games exist in this way, it exists in this way. And, like, that worked for me with Death's Door. Like, there was tons of stuff that happens in that game that comes out of nowhere, but because I can reference a thing in a different game I've played that this happens, I get the bit. And, like, okay, like, it's weird, it's random, it doesn't really have much grounding in this world, but at the same time, in this style of game, like, I totally get why this is a thing. Like, was totally okay for me in Death's Door. So maybe it would be in something like Bat-Boy too. Like, maybe if I played it, I wouldn't, like, this sort of stuff would be okay with me. It's interesting that it is kind of rubbing you the wrong way.
It's not rubbing, it is rubbing me the wrong way, but it's not in a way where, like, I'm going to stop. I still felt the desire to play through the game. I'm upset that when I fought the final boss, the way that I defeated him glitched out, so I didn't get any of the story. Oh. Like, because it was weird. I beat him, and then he was on screen, like, staticky, like he looked like he was made of television static, and it clearly felt like words were supposed to be on screen, and there was narrative happening, and then it just cut to, like, a shoot-'em-up final boss fight. Without any sort of story. And then afterwards they're referencing how that fight started. And, like, oh, I mean, I drank that thing, and then that gave me the power to fly, and it's like, what are you talking about? I didn't get any of that. But then the problem is I replayed it thinking that, well, this is the final level, so if I get to the boss again, it's going to show me the narrative parts again. No, they just don't happen. So, like, I'm going to have to look up that one video. Or maybe no video exists. Because we live in a time where, like, River City Girls 2 shipped without a story, like a cutscene, after the fight in Uptown.
Right.
Like, you beat the boss of Uptown, and then you just kept playing. And there was this whole thing where eventually they patched it to have a cutscene there. And it's like, well, that's really weird. Because, like, if I had just played that game and never played it again, I would think that that's just how you designed your game.
Right.
So, like, I got the platinum in my one playthrough of Bat-Boy with some very glitched trophies and achievements, I'll say that. Because, like, deflect 100 objects, I deflected 100 objects, like, at one point in the game. There was this moment where I'm like, I can just do this 100 times. So I sat deflecting objects until I did 100, and it didn't pop. And that's negating the fact that throughout the game, like, at least once every level, there's a deflect thing, a puzzle. So, like, I at least had done this 10 times.
Yeah.
So, like, what are you talking about? And then it just randomly popped this morning before the show. Ditto, like, the home run mechanic. It's like you're supposed to get 5 home runs to unlock an achievement. And that's basically like Koopa Shell stuff from Super Mario Brothers, where if you kill 5 in a row, you get the home run plays. And I had done that every time that it happens in the game, and there's more than 5 examples where it happens in the game. And then this morning, I just, like, kept loading up the level where I know one happens, and after about 9 times doing it, it popped for the do this 5 times. And, like, they've gone on record as saying that, like, there are certain achievements that are still, like, glitched. If you turn in all of the ingredients to the barman at the same time, then the trophy doesn't pop. Like, you need to do them one at a time.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
like, we've talked about this before. That's the nature of like games now, right? And they've realized that they can get away with it because people will always. I mean, like we stand here on the precipice of a yet another update to No Man's Sky coming out, and the ways in which people are like super excited about a No Man's Sky update versus when it, the first 6 months of that game's life is like super telling that like, if you're putting the work in and improving your game, people will follow you. And like that on the one hand is very sweet and very cool that people can do that. Can like, because we all know that like deadlines force us to do things that we're not always happy about. And the idea that people can come back and correct things. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 is about to get a big update that everybody's really excited about, which is crazy, right?
Insane to me. Absolutely insane. More insane because I had bought that on Stadia. So I don't even have access to that game anymore to give this DLC a try. And I do not care. Like, I'm not going to buy the game because of this DLC.
Well, and so, like, I couldn't believe listening to supposedly some of the people that have been talking about what's going to happen with this DLC, how much of it is actually going to also just affect the main game. Like, yes, there's like add-on stuff that's happening, but then there's quality of life stuff apparently in the DLC that's just going to get brought over into the main game as well, which makes sense for like open world game like that. That totally makes sense. Like adding stuff in DLC that ends up affecting everything is Witcher 3 had like 3 of those, I think, right? Which is why the latest version of Witcher 3 is technically Wild Hunt, and like that's like the only version to buy now, right?
Yeah. And it's all CD Projekt Red, so it tracks.
Yeah, but yeah, that idea that's how like game development cycles work now is just like we've lamented that before. It really is a risk that you take in that like if your first version of that game isn't enough to keep people around for later versions, like you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. I don't know. It was just, I was excited to play it, and I played the demo, and I'm like, oh, this controls really well, and that. And then as I kept going through the game, I'm like, yeah, like, it's just a little bit offset that is not jiving with me. And I'm not sure what it is. But, I mean, the big one, right, is everything in Shovel Knight sort of has that basis, right? So you get to the 6th level, and it's an ice palace, and all of the enemies are dressed in hockey gear. So I'm like, oh, there's going to be like a hockey guy, right? Like this, and I'm excited. I'm a hockey guy. So I'm excited for the hockey boss fight. And then no, it's like the Black Knight of the game is the boss of that level. There's no hockey guy. There's no hockey power up. I was a little bummed. They're all like, I'm like, well, what are you going to do? But it's been an interesting experience with the game, seeing how that is affected,
Yeah.
And how just games are made. And yet, like, I'm still excited for Gravity Circuit, which is coming on July 13th, which is another one that I've loved the demo, and it like.
We gushed already last week about the Nintendo stuff that's coming down the pike. I can't believe how excited I am about some of that stuff.
But like this was nice, like as not disappointing, but as sobering as my experience with Batboy was. It was that nice reminder that like sometimes this is how games come out. So like remember to temper your expectations with Super Mario Brothers Wonder, with the Super Mario RPG remake. Just remember that. I mean, Nintendo, they tend not to have the huge game-breaking bugs on release, but that doesn't mean all the games are going to be like that. Yeah. Remember that other games are, I don't know.
I mean, there was stuff with Tears of the Kingdom that they've updated, true, like the item duplication glitch that people were using to basically break the game and stuff like that. Like they've definitely made some changes. It's just that they're much more subtle about that, and they are less likely to let something get out there that's going to completely like fuck your experience, right? Like the item duplication glitch wasn't stopping people from enjoying the game as it was meant to be enjoyed. It was just that anybody that wanted to could abuse the system. And there's an argument to be made about whether or not they should have been allowed to continue to do that or not, blah, blah, blah. But like, I wasn't doing it before the update, and I certainly don't miss it now that they've updated it out, right? Like that doesn't affect me. But like, Nintendo does have their things that they're also doing this, that they're also living in this world as well.
Yeah. I mean, there was that moment in the game where I'm like, at this point, I'm going to try to item duplication and see if I can get it to work. I couldn't, but that was like where I'm at this point with the game. I need to get ready to complete the game, because what it's asking of me is starting to become an annoyance, and I don't want that. Like I had fun with Tears of the Kingdom, and we'll discuss what that actually means in 2 weeks. But it is one of those situations where, like, if I'm at the point where this is not fun, I want to find a workaround for it. Like, I'm happy that I was able to identify that and act accordingly.
Yeah, no, and funny enough, that's like kind of where I was at too, right? Like I have a bunch of stuff I could continue to do, but I realize, no, this is the moment, right? Like recognizing this is the time is important. And that's true in those kinds of bigger open world games, is you always kind of hit that. You know, it's why when people talk about doing like 100% completions on like GTA or Saints Row and stuff, like you're like, that's a rare thing and it's cool that you decided to do that, but there's a reason that not everybody does, right?
Exactly. All right. Anything else you want to add before we send this one off?
Nah, I gotta go barbecue some shit.
Ah, lucky, right? Happy birthday, America. I'm not a crook. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Say Report. Little unbalanced, but, you know, I think that we touched on some important things that are going on. Thank you for letting me get some therapy in the episode. If you have anything that you want to say to us, we can be found on Twitter, assuming Twitter still exists, at the Say Report. It's also still the best way to get in touch with Sejan, since he ran away from Twitter a long time ago, foreseeing all of this. He was prophetic on that one. But if you do send it to at the Say Report, I will make sure that Sejan is given your thoughts and you can communicate with him, and I will be your mediator.
Yeah, and make sure to reach out to Dev if you saw Dial Destiny, because like he very much wants to talk to somebody, and I am failing him in that regard.
And it's okay that you're failing me, but it's something about the film itself. I'd like to see how other people felt in that moment.
Yeah, well, they can find you at Devin D. Decker, so like let them know how you felt about it and see if you guys can have a convo.
It'd be cool. But until then, you know, Will, it's not a holiday for you. Please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Seaton Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.